Okay, week 25 of the Daily Design Challenges, the Designorama, and we're focused this week on storytelling. And in this particular exercise, storytelling is going to span a number of different things. So it'll be storytelling that you use to communicate with stakeholders, peers, colleagues, and potentially customers, as well as how storytelling may be used in the UI itself to help either add moments of delight or help carry a user through a particular interaction. And that one, that's on day three. You get fairly creative with that, and it could be very interesting. And, something to focus on this week one, stepping back and thinking about what you want to do with your career, what company you may want to work for, if it's a larger company, what facet of the company you'd like to work for. So, if you want to work for a specific product within one of the larger organizations, or maybe you want to work for their innovation arm, there's an opportunity to get in there and think about how this particular project could support you in doing so. Because a lot of what you'll be doing here is demonstrating how well you can quickly and impactfully communicate something, and that ties very, very directly to how you'll have conversations during the recruiting process and also while you're doing the work. If you could tell a compelling story, it can be a huge leg up in how not only the company values you and your team members value your contributions, but it can also be a great way to work on how you grow yourself within the organization once you're there. So, as far as daily practices, these can be completed as independent exercises, as always with the Designorama. If you're focusing on this as a weekly challenge, what I would say is look through it. So, look through all 5 challenges. You can do it by use of this video if it's Sunday, Monday. If you're catching this later, you can go through all 5 independent videos and look at them and just think about one product. You may brainstorm and say, well, I need to create a journey narrative for a product. I need to create a UI. I need to create potentially a illustrated contextual walkthrough of a user using a product in a moment. And think about how all of those can come together to communicate one thing, and then go back and focus on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And hopefully this video will help you make that more comprehensive view. Again, if you're doing this day by day and you're going to separate these into 5 independent challenges that are not necessarily focused on the same thing, a comprehensive and cohesive single piece of output at the end of the week, then you can just address these as individual challenges. So, without much further, day 1, write a user journey narrative for a product moment. And the other thing I wanted to mention about this week is it doesn't necessarily have to be a digital product. It can be a packaging experience if you want it to be. It could be a physical product itself. It could be a service. It could be a digital product. When it comes to the day 5 where you're walking through this sort of narrative of someone in context, it could be all of those things. And it could be, even as you're doing these individual challenges, each of these could be about a separate aspect, whether it is a service, physical product, or digital product aspect of the person's story, of the person's narrative that's using it. And it's just something interesting to think about. I think it can be very compelling if you're hoping to maybe work for an agency or an arm of a company that focuses very much on holistic design. So day 1, write a user journey narrative for a product moment. Choose a micro moment. So in this case, we're focused really heavily on digital applications. First login, inviting a friend, receiving a notification, and write a first person story of that experience from the user's point of view. And this is great for empathy mapping, clarifying emotional beats, grounding personas in reality. And that last one, it's one of those key reasons you do an empathy map or tell a story like this, is to really focus your audience on that person using the thing and sort of the nature of that person's life, what they care about, why they're there using that thing in the first place. Empathy mapping, you could use this prior to starting your empathy map. So you could take what you know about the user and you could write, 3 to 5 sentences that talk about the story of the user, and it helps set it up for empathy mapping. And you could use it at the tail end to summarize what you had learned or what empathetic findings you have from working with your team on the empathy map. And, in some ways you might be clarifying emotional beats using that. So you may take some of the moments from the empathy mapping and take those emotional beats and compose them into a sequence that then becomes this narrative. So you can think about it as building blocks like that, or a sequence of nodes, or you just use these tools and then be inspired and write 3 to 5 sentences. There's always the option to have a sketch. You can share your empathy map if you do one. You could use an illustrative photo, really anything to help communicate what your sentences are saying. But at the end of the day, your deliverable here for yourself is 3 to 5 sentences of user narrative that talk about that micro moment and help communicate the nature of it from the user's perspective. Included a link here for storytelling, a topic of storytelling on the Interaction Design Foundation. It'd be good to review this ahead of time before you start going through this, and just generally a great resource if you get into storytelling, or if you have a storytelling project you need to work on or aspect of a project. It's good to go in and review it. A lot of good information in there. Day 2, storyboard a user interaction from beginning to end. And this is going to request that you do a 6-panel storyboard. You can certainly do more. You could certainly do a little bit less. I wouldn't go too much lower than 6 panels. But pick a task, and again, it could be founded in digital apps, it could be founded in services, product, or any combination of those. The examples they give here: booking a service, uploading a file, onboarding a new team member. Create that 6-panel storyboard showing the key moments. And typically what this is going to look like is 6 panels. Each one of them has an illustration and maybe a sentence, or maybe 2 very short sentences describing what's happening in that panel. And there may be an opportunity to review this with someone and make modifications to it as you go. The thing to remember about storyboarding is you just need enough to communicate what's going on. You may go watch a documentary on Pixar and they look like these beautiful, pre-ink, pre-color, pre-refinement sketches. If you have that capability, go for it. But I think in terms of this phase, it may be good just to get the sketch down and get the general idea, work with stick figures and boxes and things that look roughly like what they're supposed to be, and use the sentences to help refine a little bit. And this will be good for synthesizing user flows, creating team alignment, and presenting research findings. So, if you're presenting research findings, storyboards can be great because it almost becomes a cartoon of what happens in the world and helps people see it with a little bit more context, right? It's not this highly conceptual thing that requires 100% of their imagination to fill in the gaps. You start to fill it in visually for them some. And, all of this storytelling is going to help create team alignment, but usually visuals help pin things down a little bit and make them more concrete. The output here is just the storyboard, the 6 panels, and little sentences underneath. It'd be good to have a summary sentence at the top that describes what's going on, and a title that clearly communicates what the storyboard's about. And we have a link here for IXDF's topic on storyboards. Good to review this ahead of time as well, and make sure you have a good understanding of where you're going with storyboards before you get started here. But if you've done storyboards before, this should be relatively straightforward. It's just a matter of picking what you want to do and thinking through it. Day 3, and this one's again a little bit on it's just a differently bounded, is design a UI that communicates a story visually. So, if you're working on the comprehensive week-long set, this could be a UI and an app that fits within the context of the user. and helps communicate what's going on. So choose a UI pattern or an experience. It could be a dashboard, home screen, confirmation screen, and give it a visual arc. And that could be fairly abstract, but just think about, maybe the empathy mapping you did previously, the user journey narrative that you worked on, and think about what it may mean to add from a user flow perspective, from a color perspective, from a progressive disclosure perspective, things of those nature, what it may mean to communicate a story visually using UI. And this could also be with animation and illustrations and things of that nature. This will be good for working on your refined UI. And then, this speaks a little bit back to the emotional design challenge, where it's not every day that you're going to be asked to do this. So it's a really great opportunity to do it. But think about UI polish, think about the communication of value, think about visual storytelling in MVP and pitch decks. So how, when you go to work your output, how are you communicating how this visual storytelling is fitting into the UI? Output here is relatively straightforward. It's going to be UI mockup and a caption of the story it's telling, and it could be a series of UI mockups if it warrants it. Day 4, add narrative elements to a feature walkthrough. So take a simple feature and layer in onboarding style storytelling. So who's this for? Why does it matter? How should it feel? And then use tooltips, microcopy animation, or modal flow to narrate what's happening and why. And this will be good for feature announcements, new user activation, team documentation, but take that feature and add the onboarding style storytelling. And so this could work one of two ways. It could work with in-experience communication of how a new aspect of a tool works, or it could be as if you were pitching it to your team to say, hey, this is how it's going to work. Your output here will be 3 to 4 narrative cues that you'd include. So these screens plus 3 to 4 narrative cues that you'd include in your experience. And again, this could go a few different directions, but what I would say is pick the one that seems most relevant to you. So if you are, working on a team where you'll need to document how an application works for not only documentation, but for communication with internal teams, to show them how things go, and it can't just be a video, then maybe that's what you'll work on. But if you have a different area where you could use narrative elements on a feature walkthrough, just think about how that would normally work for you, and then apply it to that particular scenario. And then day 5, prototype a storytelling, animation, or product demo. Use any tool that makes any sense, right? So you could use Google Slides to do this, and it would just be, panel with, it's almost like a higher fidelity storyboard without sort of the rough edges. It clearly communicates that narrative. It could be Figma with some animated tweening, so transitions between slides. You could use After Effects. That can be a little more high fidelity, where you are splicing live action users using a device with the screen on it, and then interacting with it and seeing the things happening in their world. But create that animated flow that shows your product in context, not just what it does, but why it matters. And this is great for executive reviews, product launches, customer education, fundraising decks. So, you could, anytime you need a super high level but very clear communication of why your app is valuable, this is a great opportunity to build one of these. Most of the time they're relatively short. They can be longer, There's the famous one from Apple that goes on for seemingly 15 minutes. But I wouldn't necessarily do that for this go around, especially if you're doing something like After Effects that requires a lot of production work to get it to work. And AI might interject itself here and help you with it as well, just building the final rendering of the output. But just think about how you would take this concept and really help people understand how it will exist in the real world and how it will impact the people who are using it. And the output here is a 10 to 60-second animated flow or click through, so if it's Google Slides, plus the paragraph script that you may use to recite or you may dub over the top of it. So we made it through week 1 all the way to day 5, where you are maybe taking everything that you've done this week and summarizing in a meaningful way, or this becomes the end cap, or so that the comprehensive layer that goes over top of everything you've done. And hopefully you've done some interesting storytelling on multiple layers here, and by going through this, you've experienced something maybe you haven't before, you've honed some skills. Congratulations on making it to the end, and I look forward to seeing you in week 26.